Welcome to No Direction, the Pathfinder News, Reviews, and Interviews podcast. I'm your one regular host that's joining you tonight, Ryan Costello Jr., and replacing Param as my guest co-host will be Anthony Lee, who writes the Behind the Screens blog for the NoDirectionPodcast.com website. And our guest this evening is Paizo developer and master of all things Golarion, in my opinion, Mr. Mark Moreland. How you doing, Mark?
Good. How are you?
I'm doing great. I'm itchy in the face, but you're probably used to that by now.
Oh, is that a beard that you've grown?
This is my Movember.
Oh, all right. Well, keep up the good work.
Thanks, buddy.
Every day is Movember for me, yeah.
You're both show-offs.
Yeah, well, it's okay. You have a full head of hair, so you got me beat.
We're talking about Golarion today. Mark, we've talked about having you on for a while now as just a Golarion 101 episode. And the reason we consider you to be the expert on this is because you basically got hired because you seem to know more about Golarion than most of people at Paizo at the time.
Yeah, I don't know if I knew more than them. I certainly showed off the knowledge that I had more than anyone else. Yeah, so, I started playing Pathfinder back in 2007 when the AP first launched, and once Curse of the Crimson Throne came out in February of 2008, I realized, oh, this is a lot bigger than just like keeping track of one campaign in my head. So I got together with some other folks on the message boards who had already started work on a wiki. They, had registered the domain name and sort of put up the framework, and then I, being the addictive OCD person that I am, was like, I will do this all the time. And I did, and so I just sort of dove headfirst into that, and basically learned all about Golarion by reading everything, processing what it said, and then writing about it again on the wiki, because we couldn't just copy and paste from the books. And so the folks at Paizo knew about me from that, and they knew that I just at least was part of a team that dominated the trivia contest at PaizoCon in 2008, and the rest was just sort of, waiting until the time was right. I didn't have a job, and they needed a guy, and, here I am.
Awesome. I remember when we first met in person at PaizoCon in 2008, or maybe it was 2009. Anyway, when we first met in person, I was really just like, Pathfinder is the RPG. And I was fascinated by you because to you, Pathfinder was the campaign setting.
Yeah, no, and I still think that. I mean, Pathfinder, while the name of our role-playing game and what most people likely identify as, when you say I'm playing Pathfinder, you say, hey, have you heard of Pathfinder? They say, oh, yeah, that's the 3.75, or they say, yeah, that's the thing that all my friends, play, or whatever. I don't think very many people say, oh, yeah, you mean the world of Golarion? But I know that there are people who play Pathfinder with other rule sets. We ourselves put out a line of novels that don't use rules, and we have comic books that are licensed, and audio dramas, and, little miniatures, and Mini-Mates figurines, and Goblin plushies, all this stuff that's Golarion that that people look at and identify as, oh, that's the iconic fighter from Pathfinder. They're identifying with the flavor. They're not necessarily identifying with the rules. And so that's always been what drew me to the setting. I guess what drew me to Pathfinder was the setting, because when I first started playing Pathfinder and really learning about the setting, there was no Pathfinder role-playing game. I mean, everything was still D&D 3.5 for the first, four APs, the first 2 years that they were out. So I always think of it more as a setting than a rule set. And, there are people here in just across the hall who would vehemently disagree with me on that point. But, that's why they're designers and I'm not.
I eventually started embracing Golarion. I was always hesitant. I was always a homebrew campaign guy, but once I started playing in Kingmaker, being my first adventure path, and seeing that not only was this a pre-written adventure, but there's little hints of a grander world, that's when I started being a lot more curious about the world at large. And I think I've taken about 6 years to be half of the Golarion expert you were 6 years ago.
Yeah.
So how
Well,
did you?
so you are about where I was when I got so busy working here that there are things now that I don't know, and I'm ashamed to admit it, but it's true. Um, it's like I was hired to be the guy who knew everything about Golarion, and part of that was because I didn't have a job for the year before I got hired. I was hit by the Great Recession like so many other people. Um, I had nothing but time to read all the books and just sort of absorb it all into my sponge brain. And now that I'm here, it's like I certainly know what I'm working on, the specific projects, and I know tangentially what other people are working on. But I don't have the time to read everything like I used to because I get home and last thing I want to do is read through a Pathfinder book. I've just been doing that for 8, 9, 10 hours, depending on if we're in crunch season or not. So, yeah, I mean, it's no surprise that it took you 6 years to get to where I was, but I haven't progressed that much more since that. So don't feel bad.
But you're saying that as you're going down, I'm going up. Will I one day be on your level, Mark?
I don't know about that.
Yeah.
Maybe. I mean, the reason we publish the books is so that everyone can know the setting. I mean, if we wanted to just be our own little experts in our little ivory towers, we wouldn't publish the material. We would just sit around here and talk about, oh, wouldn't it be neat if the Whispering Tyrant did this? Yeah, that would be awesome. And then it's just our homebrew. It's not a shared world. And one of the things I love the most is that I can go to Gen Con. I can meet people who maybe I've never met before. Maybe I haven't seen in years since I was playing games in New York or Kansas City or wherever I happened to have been when I was playing. And I can mention Varicia, and they instantly know, maybe not the depth of detail that I do, but they know what I'm talking about. Or I can create a character as an NPC in a Pathfinder Society scenario, and hear people talking about that person as though they're a real person. When I go to a convention or a game store, I think that's really that's the thing that allows everyone to be the expert on the setting, is because everyone is part of it, and everyone has their own version of Golarion that their character has changed the course of. Whether it's being elected the mayor of your town in your campaign, or defeating some corrupt noble that, according to canon, is still alive, but in your Golarion, that's the continuity, and I think that's the most amazing thing about it, is just that there are tens, if not hundreds of thousands of Golarions out there that are just as rich as, if not richer, than the one that we publish, because it's so alive.
That actually complements a question that was asked by Lycan101 in chat, and I'll just take a second to remind anyone that is watching us live. You can post your comments in the YouTube chat window, in the comments window. I will copy and paste them, and as we go along with the interview, I will be asking Mark your questions about Golarion, or any questions you have for Mark. So yeah. Lycan wanted to know, Mark, what is your favorite part of Golarion and why?
That's tough. It really depends for what purpose. I mean, as a player, I like certain parts of Golarion. As a reader, I like certain parts. As a GM, as an author, I think that some of the areas that have most interested me, I really do like the Pathfinder Society as an organization. Simply as a narrative tool, it allows for so many different types of storytelling, and so as a GM, as a developer, as a adventure writer or world builder, I think that the Pathfinder Society is really a thing that speaks to me. That is probably in no small part why I ran the Pathfinder Society campaign for 3 years. I think in terms of a location, because I get the feeling that the question was more about what part of the world. interests me the most. I really like Nadal. I like the idea of this nation that's just completely subservient to like the Cenobite god. Um, but again, I mean, I think that there's potential in every one of our nations, even the ones that we as a company haven't really done that much with yet. Um, that that I could see building a character or an adventure or a novel or a comic series or whatever out of. So.
But let's say Eric walks up to you and says, like, oh, we got a little gap in our schedule. What do you want to work on right now, Mark?
It's the thing that I'm 2 weeks behind on that I'm already working on. No, if all things being equal, if I were given the ability to write anything, I've got some pet characters that I introduced just as passing names in some Pathfinder Society scenarios, specifically in some faction head letters back in probably in season 2, maybe early season 3, that I've had the ideas for some fiction popping around in my head for a while. But having not written fiction since high school or early college, Sutter, who does all the fiction, has basically said, You write a short story, let me see it, and we'll see whether it's any good, and if it's good, then we'll publish it and all that. So that's what I would, if given the opportunity, say I wanted to do, was write some of the fiction, but I'm not there yet, so we'll see.
I'd like to see you post Pathfinder Chronicler under a pseudonym. Just to see what...
No, my time is too valuable. I get so little time to write stuff, and being here, I know that what I write we can actually publish. So it's even sort of affected the way that I work on the wiki these days. It's like when I'm doing something, it's competing with time that I could actually be writing or developing Pathfinder. So some of the fan activities and the fan fiction and stuff like that has sort of become a second priority for me over the getting people the books that they want.
I'm actually surprised to hear you're still working on the wiki in any way.
Well, old habits die hard, and there are definitely times that I'm like, I need to relax, so I'm going to go through here and I'm going to fix this template that's really broken and isn't working, and and me who has never had any technical programming training or anything, I just dig in there and I just trial and error, try and figure it out. So if there's anyone out there who knows PHP or other wiki-related programming things and would love to help the Pathfinder community out, there is a fan-driven wiki where your talents can be put to use, and you would be greatly valued. And I can be reached at mark.moreland@paizo.com, and just let me know, and I'll see if we can find a use for your talents. How's that for subtle?
No, that was perfect.
Okay, all right.
Subtle. You're plugging.
In any case, yes. I've invested thousands of hours in the wiki over the years, and it's not something that I could just abandon, despite the fact that I don't have as much time to write articles as I did. I still do a lot of troubleshooting and sort of a lot of brainstorming with people about, well, what's the best approach to this? What's the best approach to that? Or we have this weird glitch that's happening. Can anyone figure it out? So I'm still involved, but I'm not spending 3-4 hours at night when I should be asleep compiling all the references to Desna and putting up those articles. Those days are long behind me.
Now, you talked about meeting fans at different conventions, and you talked about we talked about who I used to be an RPG Pathfinder fan first, and you used to be a World fan first. Let's say you meet somebody like me at a convention, and he's just like, what do I really need to know about this Pathfinder campaign setting? How do you sell me on it?
It's really, there's two different ways. Someone who's already familiar with what a campaign setting is, I think is in some ways easier to sell, because only in gaming do you really have a campaign setting. You may have different continuities or universes. You have the Buffyverse, or you have the Star Wars universe, or you have all these different fictional universes. but none of them is really a campaign setting. I mean, the thing that really defines a campaign setting, I think, is that it is a fully fleshed out story without any protagonists. Um, and to explain to someone the concept behind, say, Harry Potter, you explain it around the characters, and you say, oh, it's, that universe is a world where wizards live with humans, and the humans don't know that the wizards are there, and these kids go to a school where they learn to be wizards, and adventure happens, and then you tell that adventure the same way that you're exposed to it as a reader through the events of those characters, or the actions of those characters and the events that they experience. But with a campaign setting, it really is, it's almost like giving someone the encyclopedia and saying, here, this is the world. Okay, well, yeah, it is. I mean, that technically you can learn just about everything there is to know about the world through an encyclopedia, but it's much less accessible. And so in that way, I think that the best way to teach people or hook people on the campaign setting is through adventures that they go on or that they read in the form of fiction or something like that. To someone who is already familiar with it, whether they've played in Greyhawk or Forgotten Realms or Dark Sun or Ravenloft or whatever, you can simply say it's a campaign setting, and they know what that is. They know basically what that entails. Oh, there's likely a different set of deities, and it exists on a different world, and some of those things that we as gamers sort of take for granted. So I assume if I'm meeting someone who's a Pathfinder fan at a con, they're one of those people. That makes my job easier. I think that the single most defining element of Golarion is that it is a world that allows for any story. I usually, when people ask me what the setting's about, I ask them what types of adventures or fantasy they like, and then let them tell me what the setting's about. So if you're that fan and you say, hey, tell me about Golarion, I say, well, what settings have you played in the past, or what have you enjoyed in the past? What types of adventures or fiction do you like?
Oh, let's say Conan, a very traditional sword and sorcery.
Okay, all right. Well, if you like Conan, if that's sort of your thing, there's a whole nation in the Inner Sea region, which is the centerpiece of the world, where barbarians live, and they fight dinosaurs. Some of them ride mammoths. It's very much a barbarian's land. That's the realm of the Mammoth Lords. They are often battling the demons who live next door in the region called the World Wound. Or they're combating the White Witches who live on the other side of them, and they're pretty mean. So there's a lot of exactly what you're looking for there.
Did I say Conan? I meant King Arthur.
Oh, you mean King Arthur? Yeah, we don't really have any of that.
Really?
Yeah. No, I'm joking. The point being that whatever they say, it gives me an instant in where I can pull that example out and go with that, because I think people are most attracted to what they're familiar with. A lot of people don't like. For me personally, I was not interested in any of the Wizards of the Coast, traditional D&D settings when I started playing D&D in the early 2000s. They'd been around for decades. I just felt overwhelmed, like there was this thing that I could just never catch up on. And that's part of why I got hooked with Golarion, was it was brand new. I could start on the ground floor and learn about it as it was built up. And so generally when I try and hook people on the setting, it's through what they're already familiar with and what they already know, as opposed to saying, well, so the world was originally created by the god, and going through what's essentially, a 324-page book of what, like, if they really want to know the encyclopedia, hey, look at that. Hey, where's yours?
Same book.
Anthony, come on.
It's in the other room. I can grab it.
Oh.
Sorry.
Right.
Sorry.
It's okay. So, yeah, I mean, I think it's easy to overwhelm someone, and I'm certainly guilty of it. Is being that person who is an encyclopedic reference on something, and then being too pedantic about it to someone who is just showing casual interest. So I usually try and use their casual interest as a means of explaining the setting to people. I know that's probably not the answer you were looking for, but that's you gave me a hypothetical situation. So, what?
No, that was fine. What?
Oh, okay. I don't know. I thought maybe you were looking for that overview of what the world is, but.
Well, why don't you give me the overview of what the world is then?
I think that in a lot of ways, the Golarion that we've published has very much been about the life and death of one man. It's about Eridan, and he's really the constant that sort of goes from the ancient past when Aslant humanity had risen to the peak of its ingenuity, to its dominion over the world. He's the one who survives Earthfall when that hubris of mankind causes the Aboleth, who were more powerful than them and had played a small role in their creation, decide to bring the stars down upon them. So you've got the shattered empire of humanity that's just sort of it becomes the human diaspora that spreads out throughout the world, and Eridan is the one who sort of just doesn't die. He's clearly a mythic character. He's got the ability to prolong his life. So about, I don't think how many years it was, 3,000, 4,000 years after the fall of the Starstone, after the event called Earthfall, he, for some reason we've never explained or explored, decides that he's going to raise an island out of the middle of the ocean, and on that island he's going to, this island he's going to raise is centered around one of the pieces of these meteorites that hit Earth thousands of years earlier, and he does this, and in the process builds a city around it, fully formed, like Athena from the mind of Zeus, and he becomes a god too. So.
Oh, by the by.
Yeah, exactly. Like while we're at it, since we're already doing these amazing things, so he becomes a god, and then for another few thousand years, he rules the city as a living god. The god of humanity, and sort of brings humanity back out of this dark age that they were in, when they were a bunch of warring civilizations that the foundation of their cultures had been just ripped out from under them by the Aboleth. Then he says, you know what, I'm sort of done being a god here. I'm going to go off and do god things in Godland. And so he leaves, leaving the people of Golarion, on their own. They continue having wars, they continue building nations, and continue all that. And he says, but I'm going to come back on this day. And everyone gets ready for him to come back, and then he doesn't do it. And all hell breaks loose, or more specifically, all abyss breaks loose. On this day he's supposed to come back, prophecy stops working. A rift opens. I mean, not necessarily on the day, but in the near aftermath of his disappearance and presumed death, a rift opens up in the north, in one of those barbarian lands you like so much, and demons just start coming straight through and start to take over in that region. There's a hurricane that floods out two other nations to the south, and that hurricane just never stops. The nation where he was supposed to come back and rule falls into a civil war and ends up being run by demon or devil worshippers. So I guess some hell does break loose. And that sort of sets the stage for the present day, when player characters are the ones who are defining the world. This one guy who has played this instrumental role, he's gone. Prophecy is dead. There's no more, you're destined to be a farmer for the rest of your life and you're destined to be the prince, and that's just the way it is. Now any character can be whatever they want, whatever they will into being. And all these things that Eridan kept in check, these balances, by keeping the Whispering, defeating the Whispering Tyrant, and then later having his worshippers defeat the Whispering Tyrant a second time. The defeat of Deskari in the north, who later comes back in the World Wound. All this balance that he provided and the guidance he gave humanity is gone. And so I think that covers a lot of the history of the setting and some of the, at least 3 of the most major events in the timeline, while also setting the stage for the individual story that every GM or every player is writing as they play the game.
How much should a GM be aware of the story of Eridan when they're running in Golarion?
Passingly. I mean, I think that it would be he's a huge figure in the world, at least in the Inner Sea. I mean, in Tian Sha, less so, simply because he wasn't from there. I mean, I'm showing my cultural ignorance here, but I'm sure there are figures in, say, Chinese or Japanese history who it's just a common name everyone knows, that I don't know because I don't live there. I've never visited those countries. I don't know the ins and outs of their culture. So someone who, say, in our part of the world, Michael Jackson or Winston Churchill, or one of these people who you say it and just about anyone knows who that person is I guess both of those examples are probably known on the other side of the world, but I remember where I was. What?
Nathan Fillion.
Everyone knows Nathan Fillion.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, no, yeah. There are some people that everyone should know, and Nathan Fillion's up there. Yeah, I mean, I guess it's hard to use a real world analogy, but it would be like mentioning Jesus or mentioning Buddha or mentioning Muhammad or some of these religious figures who are just known throughout the world. So I think that knowing the story of Eridan, because it has been so instrumental in defining the world, the people who live in that world are going to know about that. In the same way that Americans say, where were you on Pearl Harbor? Where were you on 9/11? Where were you, when John F. Kennedy was shot? Yeah, exactly. Those moments, while there are few humans who are alive today who were alive when Eridan was supposed to return, there are half-elves, and there are certainly elves, dwarves, gnomes, any of the races who live longer than 100 years could possibly have that story to tell. And something that's 50 years ago in our history, the JFK assassination, well, it's only another 50 years to get to that 100-year mark, and it's still going to be part of the public consciousness, especially if it's the death of a god. I mean, we don't live in a world where you can cast a spell or say an incantation and have irrefutable proof that a god exists, like you do in Golarion, where you just cast Commune and you're literally talking to a deity. We can't do that. So there's no equivalent of when a deity has died. But if you could talk to someone who was alive, 2,000 years ago and say, hey, do you remember what it was like when Jesus was still alive, before he died? Like that level of monumental. That monumental of an event is one that people would would remember and would show up in all areas of life, even casual. You know, it would show up in artwork. It would show up in folk tales. You would have, you know, fictional accountings of the event with the names changed to, or you know, or specific details watered down as fairy tales for children. You know, those types of things become iconic to a society, and so I think that Eridan, more than anyone else in the setting, is certainly that character for Golarion. That references to him would be everywhere, even 100 years after his death. So to that level, I think that a GM should at least know what those are, so that the people who are in his campaign, the NPCs, are putting that level of detail into the world. It you know, helps bring it to life. It's what makes an adventure in Golarion as opposed to in generic Fantasyland that happens to use Golarion gods, for example.
We got a question from Zerg Titan 99. He says, "Wait, presumed death, is Eridan still alive?"
No, Eridan is dead. Yeah, Eridan is for real dead. Yeah, no, Eridan's dead. At the time, however, 100 years ago in Golarion's timeline, people didn't know. They thought, well, he, you know, especially his faithful. You know, if you're a cleric of Eridan and suddenly you're not getting any spells and you cast Cure Light Wounds and your friend is still bleeding on the ground, you know, you're going to hope that he's not really dead. He's just gone. He'll come back, but he's dead. So we have the omnipotent meta deity status of knowing for sure that he's dead. Whereas there are deities in Golarion who probably don't know what actually happened to him, but the big ones do. And so I would include some people at Paizo along with that group. But at the same time, while we have an idea of what happened to him, and we sort of make sure that everyone's on the same page so that we aren't seeding in inconsistent or conflicting sort of hints or Easter eggs, we've never published it. I mean, it's not in print. And if the time comes, and I doubt it ever will, that we decide to say, here is the history of Eridan, here's exactly what happened, until that goes to the printer and goes to, you know, all of our subscribers and people who pick it up in the game store or buy the PDF, until those people have it in their hand, what happened to Eridan is fluid. I don't think we'll go back on him being dead, but the specifics of who killed him or how he died are they're not defined. They are still in the box along with the cat. But the cat may be alive or dead, but Eridan is definitely dead.
And James Jacobs hasn't written this, put it in an envelope, put it in a safe, just in case anything were to happen to him. We would know?
He has definitely put it somewhere where others can access it should he be unable to. And I've read it. I know that Eric has read it. I know that there are other people who've read the working assumption of what happened to Eridan, but there are some secrets that are best left unknown.
I didn't know you knew. I thought you were one of the people that didn't want to spoil it for yourself.
What? Are you kidding? No.
Is it cool at least? Is it really cool?
It's cooler than I thought it was going to be, yeah.
You didn't trip getting out of the shower?
Yeah, I mean, I had built, as a fan, I had built in my head my own little continuity of what happened to Eridan. And then, you know, I started working here in 2010, and it took a few months of pestering before I was finally able to see the document. And, you know, so I went in James's office, and he closed the door, and he said, all right, I'm going to read it to you. You know, he wouldn't show me where it was hidden, but he read it to me. And the intricacy of some of the elements that had already been hinted at in published work that I just never picked up on. I just went, wow. And I guessed incorrectly as to what happened. So in that regard, I am sad that I no longer have that mystery. I mean, J.J. Abrams has said in his TED Talk that he did when Lost was really picking up about the mystery box and how some mysteries are better if you don't know. Because once you know, they're not as good. I think Star Wars is an example. You have Obi-Wan Kenobi says just a passing line, "Oh, I fought in the Clone Wars with your father." That's cool. That could be anything. And every fan now has the Clone Wars. What are those? What was it like? And then they do a movie of the Clone Wars, and they show us the Clone Wars, and they're not as cool.
The show made it better.
The show made, yeah. The show fixed what they already screwed up by, I don't want to get into a,
yeah,
the Star Wars prequel bashing, tangent here, but part of what makes those throwaway lines cool is that they open up a door in the viewer's imaginations rather than opening up the door and showing them the blueprint of what is in that room and every little detail. And considering that we're writing a role-playing game, our job is to open those doors and provide people enough information that they can then design their own room within that door. Instead of saying, nope, this is what's in the house, and this is what is in this room, and that's in that corner, and oh, there's a secret door here, and we'll tell you what's behind the secret door in 2 years. You do that, and then eventually you realize, oh, we need to build an extension on this house, and if you've looked at a house with an extension, either from the outside or the inside, you can always tell where that extension was, and I think that's what happened with Star Wars. They had defined their world, and they did a very good job of leaving things open. Rob is looking at me strangely. What's up, Rob?
Hey, Rob.
You can come in. Oh, he has a question for John. Okay. I share an office with John, so... All right. They've left. Now we can talk about John.
What's up with that guy?
No, but I mean, that's what they did with Star Wars, is they built their 3-story house, and then they decided at the end that, oh, we need more rooms in this house. And so they built an extra wing that went off to the side, and it just didn't jive. You look at the house, and you go, that's a nice house with this thing on the side. We don't want to do that with the campaign setting. We want it to be a house with infinite doors. That we don't know what the outside of the house looks like. And we know room by room as we create them, because that means that we can always have stories to tell, and that means that GMs who are running things in our world, or authors who are writing fiction in our world, always have stories to tell and new seeds that they can grow into their own ideas.
1, I'm totally stealing that extension on the house metaphor. 2, you blew my mind with a house full of doors and you don't know what's on the outside. That's wow.
Yeah. It's like being in the TARDIS.
Oh, but I know what the TARDIS looks like on the outside. But
you
anyway,
know
yes,
what its
okay.
current chameleon circuit has it looking like. You don't know what the TARDIS actually looks like when it's not blended in with a 1950s police call box.
Touché. I want to go back to this book we were talking about and waving around. It's the Inner Sea World Guide.
Did you get yours yet, Anthony?
I can. Would that make it better? We could have the trifecta of books
No.
across 3 different time zones.
No,
You've missed the opportunity now twice, so there's no making it better.
Oh.
But yeah, going back to the Inner Sea World Guide.
Yeah, there's just one thing that's always kind of struck me as odd about the title. Inner Sea isn't a world. How is it the Inner Sea World Guide? Why is the Inner Sea so important?
Well, because if you look at our world, I mean, the entire globe, the Inner Sea region is maybe an eighth of it, probably less. It's probably closer to a 16th of the entire world in terms of area. And if we were to say this is the Golarion World Guide, for one, it would be way more work for us. Because we'd have to create information on Sarasan and on Casmaron and Arcadia and the ruins of Aslan. And while we all want to and will likely get there someday, that's a lot of content to generate all at once. And honestly, it would sort of just be like dumping, dumping all the information on people who are looking for an easy-to-digest campaign setting from which to decide where to look for more information. And if we just said, here's all this information on all this stuff you've never heard of before, that's not doing justice to those places that each deserve to really be explored in detail, the way that we did with Tian Sha. So by calling it the Inner Sea World Guide, we're basically saying this is a world guide about the Inner Sea, and we could just as easily do a Dragon Empire's world guide, or a, Sarasan World Guide. We could do a Distant Worlds World Guide if we wanted to do a hardcover about the planets. And I know people right now in the comments are going, oh my god, when can I have that? It's not on the schedule, I don't know. But by naming it that, we're basically saying this can serve as your world guide, because for all intents and purposes, for most players, the Inner Sea might as well be the entirety of the world, unless they're playing in a different part of the world. But it is just the Inner Sea portion, and not, the Dragon Empires, which I believe the intention was to do a hardcover Tian Sha guidebook, but it was such a struggle to do the 64-pager, basically from scratch, that the idea of then doing multiplying that by 50 was just not a thing that we really had the capacity to do, or I think that perhaps the market would have sustained. I mean, it's expensive to do a hardcover book, and we had an adventure path that supported Tian Sha, but there's only so long we can spend there without abandoning what we've already got thousands of pages written about. And so the time will have to be right, I think, before we do another world guide. But we now have Inner Sea Gods. We've announced Inner Sea Races. So we've got other hardcover Inner Sea books, only one of which is a world guide. So that's the long story for the naming convention there.
Venka Thelma asks, what percentage of Golarion is written and developed?
100%. I mean, 100% of what exists it doesn't exist until it's been written. So both 100% and 0, because it's an infinity, really. I mean, it's a universe, and in the same way that our universe is infinite, the universe in which Golarion exists is infinite, and given infinite amount of time and infinite amount of ideas, we could write 1,000 times what we've already written, or 100,000 times what we've already written, or 1,000,000 times what we've already written. So, because it's I don't know if the specific questioner has seen Cosmos, the Neil deGrasse Tyson or the original Carl Sagan series on space, but one of the things that I took away from that when watching the original and then the new one was that infinity stretches both directions. And so you have things that are both infinitely large and infinitely small, and I think that the campaign setting is the same way, in the sense that you can take a book like this, where you say, this is everything about our campaign setting. Oh my god, did you go get it?
Oh look, I can play too.
Oh my god, I knew you did. Yeah, the way the look on your face showed that you had it.
Wily viewers will notice I haven't left the screen.
Yeah, what'd you do? You texted your roommate and had
Unseen servant.
Oh, okay.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Unseen only because it's not a panoramic webcam. So we say this is everything about Golarion, but then at the same time we come and we publish. Oh, let me grab one. I don't actually have a good example of it right now. I should. I don't know when I was sending it. Hold on. I'm going to have my unseen servant help me out here, too. Yeah, that's perfect. And then we say, well, here's this. Ooh. Yeah. Come on, Anthony. And then we say, no. Here's everything you need to know about Irison. And this, we spent 4 pages really talking about Irison in the hardcover. This one we have 64 pages. And then we did, a whole Adventure Path volume set in Irison, as well as part of a novel, The Winter Witch, and the web fiction that went along with, or not web fiction, the Pathfinder journal that went along with the AP. So, what? See, John's doing his thing where he tries to give all the answers. John, you want to be on the podcast too?
No, I'm sure I'll go back on soon.
Okay, all right. So in that regard, I think that we can keep going down and down and down and down, and we could pick one character out of the Irison book and write an entire novel or series of novels about that one person, or we could, talk about the macro and do something more about Golarion's star system, or other galaxies, or we have in the newest issue of the Adventure Path an article about the Dominion of the Black, which sort of exists in the space between galaxies. They're sort of the crazy alien H.R. Geiger style horror element in our setting. So the question that was posed is impossible to answer because there is no set point at which we will have covered everything there is in Golarion.
She does follow up by saying that she really likes that Pathfinder continuity is important.
Me too. As the guy who was hired to do the continuity, I think that it's very good that there is a reason that I have a job. Yeah, and I think that's something that is true in all sorts of fictional worlds. And, ultimately, in our world, we can't change the continuity. Sure, you have revisionist historians, or you have people who deny science, or all these other things, but basically the physical laws of how our universe works are the laws. You can't just suddenly change it so that gravity works differently, and you can't go back and make it so that a historical event didn't happen and that the resulting events didn't happen. And because that is the way our universe works, with cause and effect and certain laws that are immutable, we as consumers of entertainment or visitors in fictional worlds like to see that those worlds have that same level of consistency. I think it's too much of a stretch for the human mind to accept worlds that don't have at least those constraints of having gravity always work the same. And if it doesn't, then that's a specific thing that is at least consistent, that gravity isn't consistent. And so when you read comic books, or you watch television series, or you read novels, any of those canon inconsistencies, they pull you straight out of the world. And I'll be the first to admit that Pathfinder, we have our share of continuity issues. But we're always working so that there aren't, because the last thing you want in an immersive role-playing game is to be pulled out of that immersion.
Now, we are going on just over an hour now, so we're going to finish up with a couple more questions from the audience.
Okay.
Lycan 101 would like to know, what is the next major continent we can expect to be explored?
I don't really know.
Don't you?
No, because I have only seen the product schedule out through like mid to late 2015. So I don't actually know what is next. I know that there is someone in the office who is sort of working as a pet project on writing about one of the continents, but I don't think I'm allowed to say what it is because, again, it's not on the schedule. It's not done. The project could never come to fruition. So currently, we don't have plans that I know of to really thoroughly explore another continent. But we're coming out with a Cult Adventures at Gen Con. That'll open up psychic magic, and we've always sort of said that Vudra is the realm of psychic magic. So we're certainly building the tools with which we could more easily explore that part of the world, for example. But it's not something that I know of being on the schedule. So right now it could be any of them. And likely it'll be a little bit about multiple of them before we do another Dragon Empires style. 6 months of our product line is based around this one continent.
Bard Wannabe wants to know, which country in the Inner Sea region is the unloved stepchild that nobody wants to work on?
Oh, I bet you could guess what they are because Pathfinder's been around now for 7 years, and there are some nations that have very, very little information about them.
Is it Isger? I bet it's Isger.
Isger actually has more about it than you would think because we've done a whole bunch of little things all set in Isger that don't scream, "I'm in Isger." You're in the right area. I would say that currently Multhun probably has the least about it. We've never done an adventure in Multhun. We've done one right on the border, but or Druma. We had a novel set in Druma though, so Druma has a little bit more. But yeah, the southern nations on Lake Incarthan are probably the stepchildren that we don't know what to do with at the moment. I know that there was an AP at some point that was going to travel to several of them that we ended up going a different direction. We ended up doing a different AP instead. So maybe that'll come back at some point. But yeah, I would say Nirmathos, Multhun, Druma, Five Kings Mountains. That region we've done the least with to date. But that's not to say that we won't do an entire AP set in Nirmathos at some point, and then it's no longer left out. It'll have a 64-page book about it and fiction set there and all sorts of stuff. So. All it takes is a reason to write about something for us to do a ton of information about it.
I can't even think of what Multhun's hook is.
They're the militaristic one, right?
Yep.
Nirmathos is the Robin Hood one?
Yep, Nirmathos is the Robin Hood one, and Multhun is we're a nation that's all about conquest, even though they haven't really ever conquered anything, but they have a big army. And they're constantly at war with Nirmathos, so at least have been for a while.
Ooh, Darren Caldemeyer suggests Armies of Golarion. Make this a product.
Ooh.
Yes, Armies of Golarion is a product that I have wanted to do for probably 2 years at least. That we just haven't ever had the right spot in the lineup for it. I could write in a matter of hours the full outline for it, and I'm sure find freelancers to write it. I have not yet been told by the powers that be, who in this case would be Eric Mona, that that's a book that I should put that effort into. And when that happens, I will gladly do it, and we'll make it the best book we can to get it out to people. So if it's a book you want to see, go on the message boards, let people know, specifically Eric, and to a lesser extent Lisa. Just say, hey, we want to see this book, and don't tell them I told. Yeah, go ahead. Tell them that I told you that I want to do it, and that in order for it to get done, they have to sign off on it, and just do that. But that's the way. That's the way to get it to happen. I mean, that's what Ships of the Inner Sea was. That's one that I wanted to do for years, and finally we did a module that, where you're pirates. After we had done a AP that was pirates, and it didn't come out at the time that Skull and Shackles was out, because it might have been overkill at that point. But 2 years later, people were still asking for more ship stuff, so we found the time to do it. So Armies is one that I'd love to see. It just hasn't been time yet. So.
Well, Eric is joining us next week, but he's joining us to talk about occult adventures. I encourage people to ask him one question about Armies of Golarion, but I don't want people flooding him.
Yeah,
talking about the cool new book.
So, and I say this knowing that Eric could very well listen to this before he comes on your show, but I'm banking he's too busy to do so. So everyone should ask him questions about Armies as if it's a book that he's already put on the schedule, and see whether he thinks that he already has. Because if he thinks he has, then it's already done, and he'll just be like, oh, I must have left it off this version, and he'll just put it on there, and it'll be good.
All right, we can make that happen.
Yeah, and John just said now I will have 2 campaign settings to do in that month, which, for Armies, I would do it. Yeah.
That wasn't Darren Kaldemeyer's only question. He also wants to know what's up with Gebbon next, basically. Well, how did that conflict start, and what's going on with them lately?
That's another question for Eric. Yeah, there are certain parts of the campaign setting that different Paizo staffers have sort of put their flag in, and everyone else just sort of leaves it alone. In Eric's case, I believe he's got a novel or an adventure. He's got something that working around in his head about that area that he's already got all figured out. And so we've done less about that part of the world, despite it being a really interesting setting, in part because we don't want to step on his toes or make it so that the novel he's been outlining or working on writing for years, or the adventure that he's been concocting suddenly doesn't work, or we spoil the big surprise, or make it so that there's no need to do this adventure because we already said what's in this tomb or what have you. So that's really the reason that we haven't done a lot with Nex and Geb. It's also just one of over 40 regions, and we can only do 2 APs a year, and generally support our APs more than we do random, a book about a nation that doesn't have other things supporting it. So when we do a Geb or a Nex AP, which will probably be when Eric says, all right, I'm ready to write a Geb or Nex AP, then we'll support it with more material. But to date, really all that we've got on the region is what's in the campaign setting. It's what's in the Inner Sea World Guide. And it doesn't really talk. We've never said what started their feud. I think it's probably easy to assume that they're both just really ambitious wizards who want to be the best, and they don't like that their neighbor is also pretty good. And one thing leads to another, and then once you're in one of those wars, how do you just stop? Your ego is on the line. You can't just be like, you know what, Nex, you're right, you're a better wizard. I'm done. I'm just gonna hang out over here with my zombies and be second fiddle to you and your extra spaces. And that's just not what wizards do. So maybe one of them just punked the other one at a party, and it just escalated. There's no way to know exactly what started it.
Well, Mark, thank you for joining us. Is there anything you would like people to know about Golarion on your way out?
Everything. I want people to know everything about Golarion.
Go.
No, that's not. Honestly, if you want to know stuff about Golarion, I mean, the best thing to do is just uh, pick up whatever book seems most interesting to you and just read it. We really try and put in every book, like that one right there. Good job, Ann. We try and put in every book, seeds and links to other books. And if you're not sure what, if you're really brand new to the setting and you don't know what you're interested in, go to Pathfinder Wiki. It's a free website. It's got like 12,000 unique articles at the moment. We're adding more every day. Well, not we. The active editors on it are adding those, and I am going in and fixing their little mistakes and telling them to do things differently. And just hit random page, or just start on that page and click on, just click. I mean, everyone's gone on a Wikipedia fugue where you go looking for one thing and you end up 2 hours later and you're on, why am I reading this thing about, like, pygmy toes? I don't even know if pygmy toes are a thing, but I bet they are. One way to find out. Hold on just a second. If you want to learn about Golarion, just do that on Pathfinder Wiki, and it's easily found at pathfinderwiki.com. And that's my suggestion. And if you can't find information, ask on the Paizo boards. Just simply say, hey, I'd love more information about, this little town in Multhune. Yes, please ask about Multhune. It wants love. Just ask. And if we don't have any information about it, we'll say. We're not going to lie and be like, well, you better keep reading the adventure path because we may go there. We'll just say we've never done anything with that part of the world yet, so it's free for you to do what you want. And if enough people ask about the same thing, then we'll do a book about it. So, eventually.
Excellent.
So that's really it.
Do you have a blog or anything? Is there anything that you'd want people to check out?
I sort of have a blog. It's not really game related. I have a Tumblr, which is Yoda Ate My Head Tumblr. I can be found on, and that's the numeral 8, which used to be my my Paizo.com username.
One of the best.
Yeah. I'm on Twitter at Yoda Ate My Head. Those are the places where it's easiest to follow me. I won't pretend to be really prolific on it as much as some other people, but those are the easiest ways. So.
Excellent. Thanks a lot for joining us, Mark.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks for having me.
Take care.
All right, Thanks. Bye.
And all right, he knows how to log out. We'll be right back to talk about the latest news in the Pathfinder News and Banter segment right after this.
Man, now I'm hung up on the type of party that would feature both Geb and Nex on a guest list.
It's a wizard party. All right, Anthony, I suggest you open all the links that we've got in the show notes for the news.
Sure.
Hey, everybody.
Most of them are already open.
Mark. We're just clicking on links.
Click.
The least exciting thing that we could be doing right now, but
I can do this.
Need to be done. All right, and I just clicked on them in the wrong order again. I always do this. All right, you ready to go?
Sure.
3, 2, 1. In the Pathfinder News segment, we talk about all the latest happenings for the Pathfinder role-playing game, and not just the Pathfinder role-playing game, Pathfinder campaign setting as well. But there's big news for the Pathfinder role-playing game. Going on right now is the Occult Adventures playtest. So you can go to Paizo.com right now. It's fairly easy to find. You just Google or you just search for Occult Adventures. The playtest will come up, and you can get yourself 64 pages of free content dedicated to the Pathfinder role-playing game that you can use in your home game, you can use in Pathfinder Society, and you can learn all about 6 new base classes with, and this is unlike a lot of the previous playtests, with new feats, new spells. Like, this is one of the most tricked-out playtests that Paizo's ever run, and just the presentation of this playtest alone has impressed me quite a bit. but Anthony, you've actually really dug your teeth into. You know what, Anthony? I'm sorry, we haven't given you a proper chance to introduce yourself. We'll finish this. We'll finish up this segment since we've already started it.
Sure.
Before we get to the next one, we'll say hello since you've been sitting here with us for an hour and a half.
Fair.
Yes, the Occult Adventures playtest. What were your thoughts?
I'm really excited. There are 6 new classes. They're as what's said on the cover. They're occult theme. This lends towards sort of Lovecraftian type themes, like with the occultist or with the psychic or the mesmerist, but also some different tacks that Paizo hasn't gotten to explore yet. And it definitely has its own niche. I know the advanced class guide came out what seems like not a very long time ago, but this certainly has already set itself apart from them.
That is one of my complaints, maybe not complaints. One of the things I was surprised when Occult Adventure got announced, that we're getting 6 new base classes on the heels of 10 new base classes, which came after only 3 new base classes in 3 years. It's just, base classes seemed like a thing that Pathfinder was satisfied with, and then Advanced Class Guide came out and was like, these aren't even fully new classes, they're combination classes, so it's like, okay, so we're still within the same realm of these are the themes we cover in our classes. And Occult Adventures coming out the year after Advanced Class Guide kind of throws that whole thing for a loop, and it's like, here's 6 new classes, whole new mechanical frames, whole new themes, and the introduction even kind of implies that you shouldn't just be playing these guys in any old campaign. You should really reserve them for an occult-heavy campaign, which is strange because unlike when Mythic Adventures came out, Occult Adventures isn't tied into an adventure path. We know the next 2 adventure paths. One of them is Giant Slayer and one of them is Hell's Rebels, neither of which are occult in theme. So this is kind of like, this is a book that's been hinted at for years. It's always been like, we're going to be doing psychic magic at one point, and here it is, and why now? That's my big question. And luckily, we're going to be interviewing Eric Mona and Brandon Hodge, who actually had a very big part in developing this book. Next week, this time next week, we'll be talking to them about Occult Adventures, so I have plenty of questions for them about it.
Absolutely. I suspect it has something to do with opening up new design space. As some of us may know, Paizo recently increased the size of their design team by 2. One is Mark. I'm forgetting his last name, and this is terrible.
Seifter.
Mark Seifter, and then Ryan. Macklin's an editor.
There's another Ryan on the team?
I'm blanking, and I'm sorry. They moved someone over from development into the design
Bonner.
team. Sorry. Yes, thank you, Logan Bonner. I don't know why I went with Ryan on that one, but anyways, I think it might have to do with them increasing the size of their design team, opening up some design space, and really playing with some new themes that we haven't yet seen in other classes, like some really strong concepts that the other classes just didn't handle well mechanically. And this might just be the time for it. They might be laying the foundation for, like Mark hinted at, some maybe Voudrin-related adventures, which was always strongly psychic suggested themes. We could speculate, but I guess next week we'll find out.
Speaking of psychic, the word psionic I don't think comes up in the entire document, and that's kind of interesting because there's always been this fear for the Dreamscarred Press people. They're like, someday Paizo will pull the psychic trigger, and that'll be it for Psionics Unleashed, their entire Psionics line. That's everything they do. They are the psionic people. And it's always been, any designer who's been asked about it has always promised that if we do psychic magic, it will not be like psionics. It will not be this point-based thing. And they were true to their word. And a lot of these themes they cover psychic magic more like how I would expect it to be. Anytime I've dealt with psionics, there comes a moment where somebody does something like in the Carrying Crown campaign, Jay was playing a psionicist, I forget which sub-school, but at one point he was turning himself into a tree person. And it's like, this is not psychic magic. This is nothing that Professor X can do. How is this psionics? because psionics and psychic magic really are two separate things. Psionics it's just a different power source. It's a different type of magic. Whereas psychic magic is what you expect Professor X to do. It's Firestarter for that Drew Carey movie. Not Drew Carey, Drew Barrymore. That Drew Barrymore movie. It's
Carey and
Goldberg and Ghost. It's all these iconic. Like you can easily pull examples from culture of all of the different classes that are featured in occult adventures. So even though I haven't quite put my head around all of the mechanics yet, because it's very magical, and I'm not a very magic player. But it's also like just thematically, everything is working exactly how I think it should.
Yeah, and reading through the playtest document, it's hard for me to contain my excitement. Like the themes mesh so perfectly with the mechanics, like the background and the flavor. You can read, and it comes through really, really well. They do introduce a lot of different mechanics. The burn mechanics for the kineticist, for example, is new and different, and it sort of embodies sort of just manifesting your powers through your force of not personality, but your constitution, your strength of being, and it feels different from, like I said, anything else they've produced so far. And a lot of the new psychic spells that they introduce are very much fit into that flavor. They're the enchantment school, they're abjuration, they're divination. Like you said, there's stuff that you can imagine, like when you say a psychic, you can very much imagine them doing. They're not just spells that we've seen before reskinned to make them psychic. They stand apart, and they stand well. I think they come across well developed.
Supporting the playtest, as always, is Pathfinder Society, but we've got an extra twist in that if you are playtesting any of the new classes for Pathfinder Society, there is a special chronicle sheet with an exclusive boon for your character. I haven't rolled up a character yet, so I don't have access to this boon. I probably could gain access to it. I am a venture officer. I don't know what the boon is. That's what I'm trying to say. I'm very curious what it is. And I'm not surprised they went this direction, because with the Advanced Class Guide just out, everyone is super excited about those 10 new classes and those 1 billion new archetypes. So if anyone started a new character in the last couple of months, it was probably an ACG class. So there was probably an extra incentive needed to really get people playtesting the Occult Adventure ones, at least like committing to one like you do for a Pathfinder Society character. And actually, also in the same blog where they reveal where John Compton actually reveals the new boon, he mentions that the Seattle area is running a Cult Adventure playtest through the Emerald Spire Super Dungeon. And that seems like a really cool way of handling the playtest. You're just going to be kind of super leveling. You're going through the super dungeon. It's got a gorgeous hardcover. It's got a lot of prestige, a lot of pedigree to it. And I don't know about your area, Anthony, but it seems like a lot more people own the Emerald Spire in my area than have actually played it or run in it. It seems like it's kind of in this flux between an adventure path which you're fully committed to, or a Pathfinder Society scenario which you don't have to plan your whole life around.
Yeah, the Boston Lodge, at least the players that I've spoken with, are waiting for official credit to be offered for the Emerald Spire.
Well, some of the low levels offer credit, if I'm not mistaken.
Have they? I need to look that up.
I may be mistaking it for something I've heard is coming.
Maybe Thornkeep?
Thornkeep, definitely. No, I know
Yeah.
Emerald Spire, there's been talk about sanctioning it, but I thought it was being sanctioned in chunks, and some of the chunks... yes, in fact, looking over the product page, the Emerald Spire is sanctioned for use in Pathfinder Society organized play. This chronicle sheet is available for download.
Oh, excellent. Well, I did not know that.
The Boston Log doesn't have any excuses anymore.
Not anymore, which means I can start running it, because I have the map pack. I'm so excited now.
Any last thoughts on the Occult Adventures playtest, which is only going on until next Tuesday? So our timing of having Eric and Brandon on next Wednesday is unfortunate. I'm just kind of surprised the playtest is almost over already. It feels like I just downloaded it today.
Yeah, it flew by. I think it's been about the same length as they did the Mythic playtest and the Ace playtest. I think it's been about the same amount of time. They opened it in the last week of October, and by next week it will be in the last week of November. So it's been about a month. I guess if that's enough time for them to gather the data that they need, then great.
The website and the blog have been talking about the various different ways you can report your data, which is you can go on the message boards and just post your results and try and be as informative and non-biased, and don't necessarily draw the conclusions for how to fix this class because you happen to have one issue within one particular encounter. Don't be assumptive. That's what I'm trying to say. Don't be assumptive in your feedback. But there will also be surveys, and sure, there's comment sections there. You can be as assumptive as you want. Next point of news, it's less fun bit of news, but there's been a strategic delay. We all remember the strategy guide for the Pathfinder role-playing game. It was originally due in February, no, sorry, it was originally due first quarter of 2014. And it is now officially going to be released February 25th, 2015, so it is first quarter of next year. Here's the story that we know. There may be more to it, but there's been also a lot of really just open conversation about it. So conspiracy theorists can have their conspiracies, but I believe that Paizo's been pretty upfront that, one, it had a much more complex layout than Paizo is used to for their hardcovers, and so it really stretched the layout team and the graphic designers to their limit. And that's completely valid because it's similar to the beginner box, but on a larger scale and put into the regular rotation. Two, that there was just recently a printing error. And what was it? It was kind of a funny printing error, and it was definitely the printer's fault.
It had to do with them not leaving enough time for the ink to set before binding, such that a number of the pages were stuck together, and that makes for a horrible book.
Yeah. So, unlike the Advanced Class Guide Adventure Path, Paizo has decided not to just run with this misprinting, and that makes sense. The strategy guide's already been delayed, so it's people that were waiting for it already know that this is something they have to wait a little bit longer for. And it wasn't one of the major releases of the year. It didn't coincide with Gen Con. So it's been pushed back. I'm actually starting to get interested in this book because when it first came out, it was when it was first announced, it was the book that I looked at and said, I may buy it even though it's not targeting me just because I'd like to own it. But now, having seen some of the preview pages and a lot of talk about how much work went into the layout, yeah, you know what? I'm kind of interested in reading this book now and just kind of experience the layout style and experience what they're talking about. It's still not going to be something that is going to come with me when I go to away games. It's not going to be something that I'm building my characters around. But it's going to be something that I'm going to be happy to own, and it's going to be a pretty product, I'm sure.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you with the aesthetics aspect. Looking at the preview pages, they're beautiful. They're really nicely laid out. There are a lot of eye-catching things that highlight really important information. This is actually a product I was looking forward to, basically right from the beginning. My home group is starting to expand into people who haven't played D20-based games before, and as some of us may know, inviting people into your group when they haven't played before can be difficult. It's sort of just like, here, this is a 380 some odd page book. These are the comprehensive rules for our game. Read it and let's play. And that can put off a lot of people. Certainly, my fiance had no interest in Pathfinder before Gen Con, and then ran through a couple of the little quests and got really excited. And this would be a perfect book for her. It's sort of like it's Pathfinder light. It's a digest, but it leaves a player better able to jump into the main Pathfinder game than a product like the beginner box. It's condensed and it's nice. So it's a shame that it's delayed again, but this is sort of a thing that was unavoidable as far as Paizo is concerned. And they've, like you said, they're really upfront and honest about it. And credit to them.
And finally, Pathfinder Society has, through a series of posts in their forums and on Mike Brock's Facebook page, there's been some indication that Pathfinder Society either satisfaction is down or play rate is down. One thing or another has led to a massive post from Monday the 17th, so this past Monday, by John Compton, just telling us that improvements are coming to Pathfinder Society. And he goes into great length to make sure that we know what they are, why they're being changed, and when we can expect them implemented. And I think the when we can expect them implemented is probably the most important hard data that we get from it, because it's one thing to hear that, okay, factions are changing, that they're going to be getting new faction symbols, but it's nicer knowing that this is something that can be implemented within the next couple of months. He says probably, and it's important to note that all of the dates come with a most likely, a probably, here's our projection. But that's something we can probably expect by the end of the year. And it's true, a lot of people at Gen Con, when they saw the new faction logos, were like, that doesn't look finished. That looks like a sketch for what the faction logos could eventually be, which is unlike Paizo. Paizo's known for their high-quality artwork and their high-quality graphic design. And, yeah, I know that my Andorran logo for whatever my default Pathfinder Society, when you sign up for Pathfinder Society, you get to choose a logo that goes on your card. When it changed to that just kind of yellow manacles, it's like, it's not fun to look at. So on top, I'm not going to read the entire post because it's long, but if you are the least bit interested in Pathfinder Society, you should read up on this, especially if you've been finding yourself less interested in it. And it's never flat out said anywhere in the blog post that the focus on a lot more alien tech and a lot more robots, basically the meta plot for Season 6, it's never mentioned as the root of the problem. But I know that when that was announced as the theme for this year, my region was like, oh good, we can go back and do more Season 0, Season 1, Season 2 stuff and kind of catch up on the original plot. Because no one was interested in it. And I guess like when the Numeria-themed adventure path, Iron Gods, was announced, a lot of people were excited, and from what I've heard, it sold well and is being reviewed very well. But an adventure path has a certain kind of buy-in where it's like, we are fully committed to this, whereas Pathfinder Society, organized play, it has to have a much broader appeal, and having a scenario or two that's committed to it, kind of like they talk about, there's actually, Destiny of the Sands comes up a couple of times as a good example of how you can tie an adventure path and all of the related products into society. That's just a 3-part adventure that does something fun with the chronicle sheets, and it's a good 3-part adventure, but it doesn't mean that the whole season had to be Osirian based. And a lot of people were complaining that the Year of the Demon, one of the things by the end of it, they were getting demon fatigued. They'd fought just too many Babao demons, and they were looking at all of their bestiaries being like, why are we stuck to just the D section? Why are we neglecting so many pages in these books? Why can't we be fighting more of these cool monsters? So that's potentially one of the issues, and that's just reading between the lines here. And another thing is that from people who played at Gen Con, the first couple of scenarios this season were ridiculously hard. There was one encounter with a swarm that was immune to fire and electricity, and it's like, you already need area of effect energy, and now it's immune to 2 of the things. Like, you need to have a wizard who happened to have memorized acid and cold. Like, you needed such a specific build to beat an encounter, to move on in the scenario, that people were just getting frustrated. And it wasn't that it was challenging, it's that it was kind of a very specific corner case and a very hard monster, and that was all they were talking about. I don't know what the plot of that scenario was, I don't remember the name, I don't remember the number, but I know there was one scenario that had a really annoying swarm, and it ruined the fun for that scenario. And I've always said that raising the difficulty of the scenarios will just encourage the people that are really good at min-maxing and completely abandon the people that are not good at min-maxing. If the people that are really good at making powerful characters, effective characters that can plow through a scenario, well, they're going to find a way to plow through a scenario anyway. And if those are the people that eventually are getting challenged by scenarios, you really need to do what they were doing with some of the scenarios in Season 5 and say, there's a hard mode. And the hard mode is for the people that can really, they want to challenge themselves to make the most effective character possible, and then be challenged by a scenario that does that. But if the default assumption is a scenario has to be hard, not just that it has to challenge a player, but it actually has to be hard, it's discouraging. And eventually, when people have lost too many first-level characters and they have to go through that first-level hump again, they will just find their own home games and they'll abandon Pathfinder Society.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Pathfinder Society, like, it's a sort of a living campaign world, and this is one of the strengths of Society, is that they can adapt it mid-season to the needs and desires of the community. I've certainly heard that the early season 6 scenarios are punishing. I haven't played through many of them personally, but this sort of difficulty level has been sort of on par with some of the harder ones of season 5, and it is one thing to make an adventure challenging. It's another thing entirely to sort of punish a group of characters for not having the 1 or 2 spells or items that will save the day. So hopefully they'll take steps in the future to sort of address these. I'm not so sure about the focus on tech, because I think there's a split focus this season. There's Numeria, and then there's also adventures in the Mwangi Expanse, if I'm not mistaken. There's a couple of different tacks that the Society can take, so I don't think it's entirely Numerian focused, although that seems to be taking the main spotlight. Sky Key and the new sigil design for the season. So I think that seems where the focus is going. I know that there are also adventures released out there that aren't. If tech isn't your cup of tea, there are still adventures for you.
It's true, but you have to sift through the tech to find it. Going into the year of the Sky Key, there were promises that it's like, don't worry, it won't be Super Numeria focused. But then when the guide for Season 6 came out, or guide version 6.0 came out,
yes,
all of the art was taken from the Numerian stuff. Everything was tech-based, the borders were tech-based. It just screamed like, this is a sci-fi year. And so if people that didn't want Numeria stuff had to buy in that, yes, there will be Numeria, had to ignore the layout and ignore the look of the guide, and then find the scenarios that don't sneak in a laser pistol or don't have, it's mostly not Numeria based, but there's a little bit of Numeria in there. Or they can choose, like my region did, to just say, there's a whole lot of Pathfinder Society out there and we haven't explored it all. There's modules, there's ways of playing adventure paths. We'll just kind of wait out this laser pistol ride.
Yeah, and I think it will definitely vary by region. I mean, we are all sort of our own isolated meta communities, as it were. I know in the Boston Lodge, our venture officers have been very careful to offer multiple tables, of the new season tech, as it were, scenarios, and older scenarios that are more traditionally themed. And at least based on the signups that we've seen, our players are overwhelmingly flocking towards the Season 6 stuff. So I guess it's preferences will vary by region.
My region has 1 or 2 tables. That's a good week. And so to set up a scenario and be like, give it a try, yes, it's got lasers and robots, while the predominant voice in my region has been, we don't want lasers and robots, we have to take a gamble on what is not a very dense population of Pathfinder Society players. So
sure,
as the venture officer in Montreal, I just kind of have to follow what they're telling me they want. And, there is a certain, I have a commitment to society, and I am only questioning the direction it went here in response to this blog post that's saying all of these changes that are being made. And actually, one of the changes that I haven't brought up yet, but Bastille brought up in the chat, is the reduction of the complexity of the rules and adventure lengths. And it's true, something I hadn't really picked up on, but a lot of the scenarios in Season 5 have a subset of rules that only exist for that one scenario. And that does require the GM to learn them and implement them and either teach them to players overtly or run them in such a subtle way that as the players are just running the scenario the way they normally would, the GM is taking notes and implementing this subsystem. And while subsystems can be really cool, it also means that much more prep time. And also it can lead to longer running time, longer setup, the 5-hour time slot is supposed to be from the minute you start playing to the last signature on the last chronicle sheet, everything should be done in 5 hours. and a lot of the scenarios were really pushing that limit. I don't think I've played many optional encounters from Season 5, and I do know that I sat down for a 5-hour scenario at a game store that went 9 hours. Like, we were opening to closing, and it was like, oh boy, it was a long scenario. And it was the GM's first time, and I don't think that was a factor because he seemed to be well prepared for it. He had answers whenever we had questions. We went wherever the story took us, but the story took a long time to get where it was going.
Yeah, and I can understand needing to add the variety to scenarios, because I mean, when it breaks down to it, like, what is an adventure? It's sort of like you get a MacGuffin, there's a thing you need to find or a person you need to talk to, and there's only so many things you can fit in 5 encounters. Like, there's only so much story you can tell with 5 encounters, and I can understand that, like, adding a rule subsystem or something is a way to spice that up for veteran players, for example, who've played through, potentially 100 or so adventures. But there must be balance. There must be balance somewhere, and we can sit and talk about sort of the merits and detractions from various adventures, but certainly it seemed to be a growing trend of more and more rule subsystems creeping into at least late season 5, and I'm curious to see what season 6 has, especially after this update.
Now, a lot of the hard stuff they're talking about to change the length of scenarios, most of that won't be implemented until later in 2015. Although, no, some of them, we might start seeing these changes in January of 2015. I kind of feel bad for John, because that means that he's taken scenarios that were written with these extra encounters and all the different things pre this revision, and he's got to cut out encounters, and he's got to take something that was a certain, going to play a certain length, and then retrofit it with this new set of guidelines that the author didn't have. So it wasn't the author's fault. It's not John's fault. It's just a reality situation, and all that extra work is falling on John's lap.
Right. Hats off to John. That seems like quite the task.
Boy, there's just so much to this post that I'm trying to make sure that we get all of the talking points. I guess just the overall theme of it is we've listened, we're implementing it, and reading over every single bullet point, I can either say, like, yeah, that has affected me, or I've heard that affecting other groups. And the direction that he's talking about going in is it just sounds promising. It just sounds like exactly what society needs. Oh, the journal cards. Journal cards are a really cool way of using the factions. So factions have kind of fallen by the wayside since, well, it was kind of, there's two parts to it. There were faction missions, and then there wasn't. There were kind of the overarching meta plots for the factions that some of them got muddled and lost, some of them were better developed than the others, and they all got concluded in the paths we choose, but it wasn't a completely satisfying conclusion to some of these meta plots, and you had to have played certain scenarios with, because you couldn't just play in an order with one character and get all of the meta plot. You'd have to play with multiple characters and either have multiple characters with the same faction, or hope that somebody, like, let's say I was really trying to follow the Sarni meta plot, but it went up and down in level requirement to actually play those scenarios, that if I wasn't playing my Sarni character, I was hoping there was a Sarni at the table so that I could get that information. Otherwise, I would have to go and read it in the scenario, and that's the least fun way of getting that information. What they're talking about doing now is a journal card. So every faction will get a card with 10 different goals for that scenario, and they are thematically tied to the faction, but not mechanically tied to any one scenario or any one season. So the example they give is, if the Dark Tapestry wants you to get 10 named books, then there are named books throughout the entire run of Pathfinder Society. So as you go, you'll slowly be finding these, and you'll be able to check them off and eventually get a check mark. The more check marks you have on your card, the more exclusive boons that are related to your faction you can unlock. I think that's just a brilliant way of doing it. And it means that if you're looking for named books, then anytime you come across a library, your character might be like, oh, I spend a little more time in the library. And somebody that's not in your faction might be like, why? And you're like, no reason.
Especially if you're Dark Archives, I can see that. And yeah, and it would encourage GMs to actually sit and flesh out a little bit more description. Not a long time, but like another 10 seconds, 15 seconds of room description, because there have been a number of times where I've sat at a table and the GM's sort of just like, yep, and there's a library, there are books on the shelves, and like there's nothing to counter here, so let's move on. I mean, for the sake of time, but at the same time, like, at least in the last season, sort of faction missions have been thrown by the wayside, mostly because they're optional, right? And I can't count the number of times that I've sat to GM a table and one of my players has asked me, what's my faction goal for this season? And not playing their faction, I'd have to sit and I don't know, I'd have to sit and look it up. Like this card that you could print out or you could carry with you. I mean, this seems like a great solution to all of that, really.
And I'm just going to end on another positive note. I really like the direction they're talking about going with the season plot line, because this season, last season, the last 3 seasons have been dedicated to the same plot line as the Adventure Path that releases at Gen Con, which is great because there's a lot of new support material. So when Year of the Demon started, the Demon Hunter's Handbook was out within a month, or it might have been out on the exact same day. And so you could be excited and be like, I'm going to be fighting a lot of demons, and I happen to also have stuff that's really good for demon hunters. The World Wound book was out, so you could be like, oh, I'm going to be an expert on the World Wound, so I'm going to read up on this, and I can roleplay it. It's great. It's great that stuff ties into it, but there are downsides. You get tired of fighting Babao demons, or in the not Year of the Lantern Lodge. What was season 3?
Was it not Year? It was
it Year of the
Year
Lantern
of
the. There were lanterns involved.
Oh, many lanterns. Wasn't the Haujin? No, they didn't name it after the Haujin Tapestry, because that was a big sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure it wasn't Year of the Lantern Lodge.
Maybe it was.
I'm sure somebody is shouting it to us in the comments right now.
In any case, that started really strongly thematically tied to the Adventure Path that was out, the Jade Regent. The first half was really strongly tied to it. The second half was just, oh, and this thing that you got related to the Jade Regent, well, now we were using it to go to all kinds of other adventures. And so it was only dedicated, like only half of the year was technically dedicated to it, but there were kind of like name checks and whatnot, so that it tied into it being the year of the Lantern Lodge, rather than just the half season of the Lantern Lodge. Well, the Destiny of the Sands example is a great one, because Osirion's not a region that I was interested in role-playing in, and the only reason I played Destiny of the Sands is because Kathy was super excited about it when she played, so I jumped in on her game, and I ended up really enjoying it. And I can see the potential for a tie-in, or sometimes they'll be releasing an Adventure Path that really excites me, but I know it'll be years before I play it. Well, at least I can get a 3-part Pathfinder Society scenario, so I can get a little bit of my teeth sinking into that part of the world or that theme or whatever it is about the Adventure Path that interests me. So that's a great way of doing it, and then the actual meta plot for the season will be tied into what Pathfinder Society is all about. You're going out, exploring, finding new parts of the world. I didn't bring this up in our interview with Mark just now, but part of how I got to know Golarion is by playing Pathfinder Society, and it's constantly taking me to new parts of the world and meeting that character, not just reading about it, but actually getting involved in that part of the world. And there's been less of that over the last couple of years, and it sounds like Season 7 will be all about exploring. No matter what the meta plot will be, we'll be going to a lot more parts of the world, and we'll be learning a lot more about Golarion.
Yeah, and I always thought that was one of the strengths of Society Play, was that, I mean, if you really want to explore a region that is detailed in Adventure Path, great, go play that Adventure Path. But if you're interested in Isger or Malthun or Geb or Galt, these other areas that haven't really been touched on by Adventure Paths, there is at least a dozen, or half a dozen, let's say, that's a conservative estimate. There's at least half a dozen adventures that touch upon it, or are based there, or feature prominent NPCs that are from that area whose experiences are colored by it. So, what is it? Explore, report, cooperate, and like, you're right. I think in the last couple of seasons, the society has felt more like a political entity that goes to a region, a specific region, and does a bunch of things in that region, rather than sort of spending their resources exploring the world. So I'm really excited about this direction. I think this will give Paizo and fans the opportunity to explore more of Golarion than just the adventure path.
And good news, John Compton himself has chimed in to tell us that it's the year of the Ruby Phoenix. Yes, it was.
Thanks, John.
And
We're sorry.
Harvestarian says that it's the Dark Archive, not the Dark Tapestry. Where did I get Dark Tapestry from? Because that's definitely a thing.
It's the space between the stars. It's the void. Dark Tapestry is like a sorcerer bloodline, and it's a bunch of.
So
it's an oracle.
It's a thing. I've heard it before.
It's a thing. Oh yeah, it's totally a thing. It's just not a society faction. John Compton has also chimed in Mark Moreland's three-toed pygmy thing, which is apparently a type of sloth or sloth. I guess it depends on how you pronounce that. Sloth.
Of course, it's a sloth.
And he's put a Wikipedia article as he's citing his sources like.
That's good. I'm big into sloths lately, so maybe I'll read that.
Are you?
This goes.
Are you big
back
into pygmy sloths?
Do you want to know why I'm big into sloths?
Sure. I'll bite.
Tina's pregnant, and I made a comment about how childbirth isn't a miracle. Sloths get pregnant, and sloths are named after the sin of laziness. And then a friend of mine, in retort, showed me a picture of a baby sloth, and they are adorable.
They are adorable. I'm amazed that you said something to that effect to your pregnant wife.
There are things I've said about pregnancy to my pregnant wife that I do not feel comfortable repeating on the podcast. Oh,
okay, great. Moving on. But I agree, sloths are adorable. I want to meet one. Actually, this is super tangential. So no, I've come within staring distance of a sloth, but much too far away. They are one of my favorite animals. They're great.
They have long, blunt claws.
Actually, sloths are a miracle. The fact that they're not extinct yet is miraculous. They're just so like how are they alive? They're just so slow and so open to predators. Anyways, this isn't the Let's Gush About Sloths podcast, I suppose.
No, but that is it for the Pathfinder news. We're going to be right back to wrap things up right after this. Anthony, you never got your chance to introduce yourself, so we'll do that at the beginning of the wrap-ups. How about that?
At this point, I'm not really sure what I'd say. I mean, you gave a fair introduction in the beginning. I mean, this is how I'm relevant. I write for NoDirectionPodcast.com, but listeners will know me from that. But otherwise, I'm a fan turned fill-in podcaster. So.
All right, then we'll skip that and we'll go straight to the wrap-ups. Do you have anything? I know you don't have anything in the outline, but if you've got anything, get the URL now so that we can be all smooth and stuff when people listen to the podcast.
I don't have anything particular to shout out. So I think it's all you.
Okay.
Yeah. But I'm ready when you are.
We will be wrapping up in 3, 2, 1. Thank you for joining us for episode 95 of No Direction, the Pathfinder News, Reviews, and Interviews podcast. Before we go, first of all, we want to thank Mark Moreland, who sat in for a good long, hour-long chat or more, talking about Golarion, talking about how to learn more about this crazy world, and just what is it about Golarion that's got such a lasting appeal. And he also told us about to watch out for extensions to houses, if your house is a metaphor for your multi-million-dollar franchise. And I want to thank everyone that provided questions, and for John Compton for reminding me that it was the year of the Ruby Phoenix, which I have a T-shirt that could have told me that, but I was drawing a blank. But luckily, we've got a live audience to help us ask questions and answer our questions. Before we go, and Anthony, I should thank you. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for filling in for
Of course.
Param will be out for the time being. He will let me know when he's ready to come back to the podcast. He's doing fine. Just he needs a little time away from the podcast, and Anthony replaced him today. You might be a long-term replacement. We might rotate guest co-hosts. We'll see what happens. But definitely thank you for being available last week, even though we had the technical issues, and being here with me today.
Yeah, of course, always a great time.
A couple of things I want to shout out to. Adventures Helping Out. Adventurers Helping Out is an initiative being run by John Brazier Enterprises. Whenever you donate food, money, or time to your local food bank, your local charity, you share it on social media with the hashtag Adventures Helping Out, Adventurers Helping Out. And as thanks, John Brazier Enterprise will send you a free copy of Book of Beasts, War on Yuletide. So it's a mini bestiary. It's a free PDF just for doing something that a lot of us do this time of year anyway, that is donating food, time, and money to food banks. And I like it's a nice, non-denominational charity. It's something that every region has a food bank. Every region has people that are in need of food banks. And it's just a nice little token to thank the people that are helping out other people. So good on you, John Brazier Enterprises. Really good initiative, and I hope to be using that hashtag at least a few times this season. And I also want to give a shout out to my Movember page, which is movember.com/geekmogether, which sounded a lot more clever in my head until I actually had to say the URL. Yes, if you go to movember.com/geekmogether, you can donate to my ridiculous mustache that I hate so much and I want to go away, and I can't wait for December 1st, because I am not a facial hair guy. I'm thinking of just shaving my head, just getting rid of it all. Except for the eyebrows. I need my eyebrows.
So what you're saying is if listeners donate, you'll shave your head.
Okay, sure. I've raised $25 so far. And just don't make me regret participating in Movember this year, guys. So how about that? If I raise $200, I will put out a survey to anyone that donated to me, and you will get to decide my haircut. It will include things like completely shaving my head, some kind of mohawk. Oh, you know what? When I was in Cubs, at one point I had a crew cut, and my dad shaved a wolf into the back of my head. So we'll put that as one of the options. This will take place January, so that my mom isn't upset that I've ruined all the Christmas pictures. So donate now, and at some point I will send you a survey, and you get to dictate what happens to my hair if I've raised $200. So movember.com/geekmogether. Or you can just search for Ryan Costello. Just remember to search in Canada. It'll narrow it down to me and this guy named Brian Costello. I don't know him, but seems like a good guy. Likes mustaches. Maybe he hates mustaches. I don't know. But until next time, I'm Ryan Costello Jr.
And I'm Anthony Lee.
This is, wow. If you want to find the path, you need no direction.
Wow, sorry. Yeah, I totally threw you off on there. Yeah.
What? No, that's fine.
I was waiting for, and I'm Jefferson J. Thacker, also known as Param.
Well, that wasn't going to happen.
Yeah, no, I know that now. Sorry about that.
Bastille hopes that you will play Pathfinder again.
Oh, yes. Bastille, if you're still listening, I'm still putting together a group. I need to find time for things that aren't life-sustaining things like work and other work. But as soon as I get enough time on my schedule to fit in another game, I intend to send emails out to listeners that I've played with before, at least, so we can get another online game going, because those are fun. I met a lot of great guys, great people playing through the online stuff through No Direction.
Oh my God, I forgot. I wanted to tell a story of the most hardcore online game that I completely ruined. So I'll tell it now. This will be a bonus feature to anyone that's still listening. Corey in my local group and Jeff, both out of nowhere, we were just sitting around the table about to do either our first session of Rune Lords or one of the gaming sessions we had before we did Rune Lords. And Corey just randomly looks up cons that are coming up because he wants to play a lot of Pathfinder Society all of a sudden. And they found some convention, I believe it's in Ohio. I think it might have been in Columbus, Ohio, which is like a 12-hour drive from here. I've driven to Cleveland, Ohio, and it is not... It's a pleasant drive, at least. It's kind of like nice scenery, but it's a long drive, and you have to either start where it's dark or end when it's dark. They just decided they're going to go to this random convention they just discovered that's happening 2 weeks from then, and that happened this past weekend. And I was chatting with Jeff on Facebook, who was, while they were driving back, and we got the idea, like, what if we play Pathfinder online? He'll be like, Corey's driving, Corey will just listen and tell Jeff what to do, and it'll be Jeff, Corey, and I recruited my friend Will, my coworker Will, to also join in this game. And then we downloaded just a random scenario that none of us had played before. We were getting all ready to do it, and then I was having technical difficulties because, once again, Google Hangouts was not working for me. And finally, I was like, it's 10 o'clock on a Sunday, and I work tomorrow, and this is going to be at least 4 hours, if not more, because this is a really complicated situation
Yeah,
we've just set up for ourselves. So I had to be a stupid adult and be like, I don't want to cause Corey's car accident. We're not playing Pathfinder as you drive.
Yeah, I mean, from a safety perspective, I think that was probably the right call. I'm not sure that you guys wanted the notoriety of being the first Pathfinder-related car accident in the States or Canada, depending on where he was at the time. But that would have been an amazing feat of PFS via cell phone, Google Hangouts, and with mobile players who are traveling across a national border. That would have been amazing.
What's amazing is that it's 100% possible. This is something we could have done.
It's true. We live in an exciting time.
The future is now.
I think actually every generation has probably said that, but
yeah,
we live in the most exciting time.
Past generations wrote
Until,
stories about what this generation, the stuff we're getting now, when it would finally happen. It's finally happening, and we're using it to play role-playing games across the country.
It's true.
This may be one of my life's regrets, not actually running that game. But man,
the great thing is that your life is far from over. So there'll be many opportunities to try that again.
Yeah, who knows when Jeff and Corey are just gonna be like, let's go to another con this weekend. Just get up and go.
Yeah, that's the heck of an impulse. 12-hour drive on the drop of a hat for Pathfinder. That's some dedication to the game. I'll say.
Oh, the Harvestrian says he's from Ohio. Columbus seems more your style. So I've been through Ohio like 1,000 times, but I don't think I've ever even stopped in Columbus. So if you want to give me insight into what makes Columbus more my style, I'm very curious. But I've got some friends that live in Elyria, so I visited them 4 or 5 times now. They've got a nice house. They're always very welcoming. It's my friend Lance Sputnik from the G.I. Joe message boards. Just has an amazing basement full of G.I. Joe stuff, so it's always cool to come and visit his basement. But it's also, they're like-minded people. If they were my neighbors, we would basically just build an extension so that our house would a connection, because we really get along with the Sputniks. But neither one is originally from Elyria, so I don't know what the Cleveland area is actually like, except for all the times I've driven around and done stuff in it. I saw the new Godzilla movie in Cleveland, Ohio, actually. It doesn't really affect my opinion of Cleveland or Godzilla, just a fact. Oh, Bastille has suggested that I shave a goat into my hair.
Yeah, I think we the fans miss goat a lot.
Me. I miss you too.
All right, I think we're going to call this one. Thanks,
Yep.
guys. Hope you enjoyed the extra, I don't know what to call this.
Extra hours. The after show.
And remember, normally we do the podcast every 2 weeks, but because of last week's technical difficulties, we're actually doing 2 weeks in a 2 weeks in a row. It's next week. It'll be the, I want to say 25th. Nope, the 26th. So join us next week, the 26th, when we've got Eric Mona and Brandon Hodge talking about occult adventures. Take it easy, guys.